So if you're watching this, you probably have an ultra-wide gaming monitor or interested in Liza P's performance in an ultra-wide format. Well, that's exactly what you're going to be getting from this video. I'm going to be giving you a short review of the game. I have around 6 to 8 hours playing from yesterday. So I'm going to be talking about the gameplay, especially if you're a Souls veteran or coming from a Souls-like background. But I'm also going to be talking about the game from a completely new player's perspective, so those will be broken up. The entire video is going to be timestamped and chaptered for your viewing convenience, so you can go to the parts you're specifically interested in. And I'm going to be talking a lot about the performance and actual how the experience is in the ultra-wide format. So let's get right into the content. So the first thing you're probably concerned about is how is the game's actual performance. I'm happy to say the game performs really, really well. I have a i7 13700K with a RTX 3080 Ti, and it runs extremely well. This is with 32 gigabits of DDR5 memory, and I was getting well over 100 frames a second pretty much consistently. One thing to note is that the developers Neowitz did add Devuno anti-tampering software less than a day from the game's launch, so most of the reviews you're seeing online were actually run before the game had Devuno, so I would take all of those reviews from, let's say, a week ago with a grain of salt. You want to be looking for reviews that actually have Devuno, because this can affect the game performance. I did see certain amounts of micro stuttering, which is a real problem with Devuno, but this was only about once per hour and really did not affect my gaming experience too significantly. But I wanted to note that because a lot of people are really against Devuno, myself included, and I did think this was kind of a shady tactic right at the end. But overall, for the game performance, it's extremely good. And another thing I want to be showing is actually all the settings, and that will be in a later part of the video. This is all on Ultra. So all settings here are Ultra with DLSS quality on. So first, I want to review the game from a Souls fan perspective. So just for a little bit of background, I played every Souls game except for Bloodborne because I don't have a PS4 or PS5. So I'm pretty familiar with this genre of game. I've also played other Souls-like titles like Steel Rising, and I'm happy to say that outside of FromSoft, this is the best Souls-like experience you're going to get in gaming right now. So even though it doesn't compare quite as well as, let's say, with Dark Souls 3 or Elden Ring, it is way better than anything like Steel Rising or any title that you're going to get outside of FromSoft. The interface is exactly like you would expect from a Souls title. So if you play Dark Souls 1, 2, or 3, then this is going to feel extremely natural. Basically, all the exploration is very similar, but it is more linear. So that is the biggest thing it's borrowing from Steel Rising. You are on rails. It is a corridor type game. You can't really get lost, and it's not like Elden Ring. There is no open world component. There is hidden loot to find, but honestly, the loot that's kind of out of the way is still on a fairly minimal situation. There are minor quests. I'm showing everything here in the first 2 hours of the game because I don't want to include any spoilers from my later parts of the playthrough, because I do think you should enjoy that for yourself in an organic way. But I will say this, if you've played a Souls-like title, you're going to be pretty happy here. The biggest main deviation is when you're locked onto an enemy, you cannot actually dodge roll. You can only sidestep dodge. I don't think this was a good change because a lot of times it does make sense to actually be locked on. And the only way you can dodge roll when you're actually starting the game is to basically unlock the camera, which isn't very efficient for a lot of boss fights and mini bosses. You really do need to have the camera locked on. The iframes are pretty high. I would say it's somewhere between Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3 in terms of iframes. It's definitely not like Dark Souls 2 with its very limited iframes. You do have a pretty substantial amount of iframes, and it looks like pretty much everything in the game is dodgeable through iframes. I didn't find any attacks that were non-dodgeable with iframes. So you can just literally like sidestep, dash, or roll out of pretty much almost any attack. So if you're from a Souls perspective, you are going to be getting your money's worth in this game, because the gameplay is fluid, the combat feels really good, and you have a variety of weapons, with different weapons basically being customizable, where they actually comprise two components, the blade and the handle, and basically when you combine these two, you get a unique weapon. So I think the weapon system is fantastic. The other items and just the amount of items, though, is less than the Souls-like. I will say this, if you're from FromSoft, expect about 60 to 70% of the loot and variety of gameplay that you would get in those titles. This is a little bit more limited. From what I understand, that was similar to how Bloodborne worked as well. You do have a much more limited set of tools, and you're basically never going to be able to dual hand weapons because your left hand is in a very similar to a Sekiro. It has special abilities, but honestly, these special abilities are pretty minor, and I think they could have done away with them because I've never found them to be super impactful. But the right hand attack is really, really good. You can get very large blades, kind of like great swords. You can get really small rapiers. You can do a large variety of things, and I think actually the weapon customization and upgrading system is going to feel extremely familiar if you're a Dark Souls fan, and is a fantastic, fantastic gameplay experience. So now I want to discuss Lies of P from a non-Souls-like fan perspective, an RPG player's perspective. I will say this, buyer beware, seriously. This game, although it's not as hard as the hardest bosses in Souls-like, is very hard. Very, very hard. If you're coming from, let's say, like a Witcher or a JRPG, let's say like classical games like Final Fantasy X, you are going to be surprised. This game is viciously difficult, and I would really be careful. Know what you're getting into. You're going to have to try each boss at least several times per boss, and there's going to be some bosses that are going to take dozens of attempts. This is definitely a game for people that want to, quote-unquote, get good. Even though I think that's a terrible term, and I don't personally agree with it, I do think that you need to have very good pattern recognition, very good timing, and you need to figure out how to optimize builds. It definitely isn't a game that is for newer fans. Like, if you're just coming into gaming, this would probably be not a game that I would recommend. I would steer you towards maybe more casual, friendly experiences, like, let's say, Baldur's Gate 3 that just came out, and that I have a lot of content for, so definitely go check that out. But yes, if you're a newer RPG fan, I would not recommend this game. I think the difficulty is fairly merciless, and I just wanted to note that. Although the gameplay experience is fantastic, and if you do stick it out, I do think you will really enjoy yourself, but it is very difficult if you have not played other Souls-like content. One place that I was absolutely impressed in this game is in the settings menu. The settings are absolutely fantastic and actually far exceed a lot of Souls-like titles. You have full FSR support, you have DLSS support, which if you're using a NVIDIA card like mine, really you almost notice no image loss, and I would highly recommend turning on. Although even without DLSS, the game performance is fantastic. You can adjust the brightness, HDR works good in this game. You can adjust the controls and keybinds. This is a fantastic settings menu, and I really think NeoWitz did an incredibly good job. Overall, it is absolutely great in terms of settings, and I give them a lot of props for this because this is where a lot of games really fall down. This game, you can control almost everything in your experience. So for those of you that want a quick summary of my thoughts, basically I think the game runs absolutely incredible in an ultra-wide format. I will say this, that you do have to note that the cinematics are going to play in regular 16:9 aspect ratio, but everything other than that is going to be completely able to be played in an ultra-wide format. The performance of the game is fantastic, although they did sneak in Devuno, which was a little bit of an underhanded tactic. But overall, the game runs fantastic. The boss fights are fun. The game is mercilessly difficult, so be aware of that. If you're an RPG fan but haven't gotten into the Soulsborne fandom, you will be surprised. The difficulty is very, very high, and I want to warn people about that. But if you're a Souls-like fan and you like titles like Elden Ring, Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, you're going to love this game. This is a very smooth game. It's much better than almost anything that people other than FromSoft have made, and if you had hidden the title, you could think that this game was from FromSoft, although probably would be one of their weaker titles. I think that the bosses are also really fantastic in this game. I didn't want to include much footage outside of the first hour or two because I do think these bosses should be experienced on your own, so I'm really only showing the tutorial levels and the first boss of the game. But yes, I would recommend getting this game. I do think it's worth the money at $60. I would not get the deluxe edition if I was not a content creator. And I want to say that anybody that's looking for boss guides, build guides, anything for this game, please subscribe and like the video. It would really help me out. It helps me with the algorithm, and I'm going to be making constant content for this game, including boss guides for every single boss in the entire game, as well as build order guides. I really am enjoying this game. I had an absolute blast. I hope you did too, and I hope this review was helpful. Hit the like, hit the subscribe. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next video.